Welcome to the Fraudcast. This is a weekly get-together that Vito and I host for people in the fraud and risk space. And this is just a really great place for people to come together to hear about the latest fraud trends in the e-commerce space and utilize a really great group of folks on a regular basis when you have something that's going on, something that you're tackling in your day-to-days, to maybe ask for advice, hear about other people's experiences. This is a really great group of people to ask questions and do that with. So there are a few ways that you can participate during the session. Of course, Vito is going to start us off with a little bit of food for thought. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about like consumer abuse and things like that specifically. Vito is going to talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing in our data. And then we're kind of going to open it up for discussion, but feel free to chime in throughout as Vito is speaking. This is just something to get the ball rolling, a little bit of food for thought, something interesting to start off with. But if you guys have any thoughts or questions, feel free to let us know. And you could do that, of course, by submitting in the chat. That's open. You could feel free to submit your comments and questions in the chat there. Or you can feel free to come off mute and interject. This is supposed to be a conversation. This is not your typical webinar session or trends readout or anything like that. It's really intended to be a conversation. And that being said, there are, like I said, some familiar faces in the room, but for like new folks too, whether you've been here before or you haven't, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat so we have an idea of who we're talking to. We don't feel like a big bunch of strangers. We're all, experts kind of in our fields and in our space. And we should feel free to, just talk to one another and connect. And if someone brings something up that you find interesting, hopefully, you can reach out to that person and get a few more details and continue the conversation outside of this space too. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, maybe the company that you're coming from, your title, and your LinkedIn if you'd like to share. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Vito to kick us off.
What is up, everybody? It's Wednesday. I'm so happy to see all you here. That this week has kind of flown a little bit, I think, but here we are. So great to see so many old faces, so many, well, old is a kind of, so many familiar faces and so many new faces. I'm definitely excited to see some people like a certain Ryan McDonald and Brian Davis here for the first time. Very nice. What's up, y'all? Ryan and Brian, try saying that 10 times quick. And I did a lot of hanging out at MRC, so it's great to see y'all here. I'm sure you'll have a lot to add. So happy to see y'all, but especially happy to see you, Shelly, because some of the stuff I was writing about today and some of the stuff we'll be talking about, I think is right up your alley and everyone else's alley. So let's dive into it. Let's see if I could share my screen without a hiccup. 3, 2, 1, did it. Record time. Look at that. All right. So today, my friends, we are going to discuss a little bit of sociology. And maybe we have some armchair or accredited sociologists in the room here, because we're going to be diving into why do good buyers turn bad. And before we do that, I have a little bit of a question for you that I'd love for you to kind of pop into the chat. If you've got a response to this, I'm sure you do. If you don't have a response to this, you might be sleeping, I think, because all of us are kind of struggling with this in some capacity, right? What sort of flavor, what sort of style of first-party abuse are you struggling with right now? I'd love to see it in the chat. I'd love for you to toss something in there, because this is going to be a very wide-ranging conversation about first-party abuse. As you'll see in a couple of seconds, there's many flavors to it, and none of them particularly taste good. So would love to see you toss something in there, especially as I get into my spiel here about some network data we've got around first-party abuse. I want to call out some big, hairy, fat numbers for you. 63% of merchants in our network said that first-party misuse, first-party abuse has increased in the last year. It's kind of like a no blank Sherlock. I imagine from your side of the ball, you might be feeling that at 1,000%. Almost half of the merchants said that first-party misuse, abuse is their biggest fraud problem. Might also be another obvious one for you. 20% of all the fraud incidents that were reported by merchants over the last year. When we talk about this year, it's 24. And by the way, happy Q2, which means that all of the chargebacks, most of the chargebacks, but almost all of them from Q4 24 are earned out. So we could really have that solid vintage there. I'm writing a blog post about that vintage. You'll be seeing that in a little bit. But 20% of all the fraud incidents reported in 24 were first-party fraud, and that's up 16% from the year prior. Leads us to our first big sociological question here. Whoa, I skipped one. Well, here, there it is. Okay, boom. I told you I wasn't too good with these slides. It begins with a quote from Philip Zimbardo. I don't know if any of my sociologists are familiar with who this individual is here. I see Drew smiling. He might be tipped off by something. The line between good and evil is permeable, and almost anyone can be induced to cross it when the situational forces are strong. Evil, you might think, is a little bit of a overstatement, but probably not when you look at that kind of GMV that's up for grab when it comes to first-party abuse, misuse, returns fraud, promo abuse, all those kind of different flavors. It's quite evil to think of all that money coming off the books, or all of that product that somebody in somewhere had to make, and now it's being squandered or stolen. That's kind of evil. I would probably put it there. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with Mr. Zimbardo's work here, he was indeed the scientist who ran the Stanford prison experiment, which, if you're not familiar with that, was where he got 14 people for a 2-week period over at Stanford back in the 70s to sign up to be prisoners and guards. This experiment went south very quickly. It was scheduled to run for 2 weeks. It ran for 6 days because there was just wild amounts of abuse and worse in the scenario. And if you're a cinephile like me, you might want to take a look at the 2015 movie, The Stanford Prison Experiment, which is pretty good. So that's what this fellow was writing about. And I think we might be seeing a lot of this across our network. And here's a little example for you. In 24, these were the top 10 industries by percentage of first-party chargebacks. I know the type's a little small. I'm giving you your eye exam for the day, but check out some of these. Commodities and collectibles, 70% of the chargebacks there were friendly fraud. Now, commodities and collectibles, to be completely clear with you, is stuff like gold bullion, precious metals, coins, things like that. Adult toys and novelty, which leads me to our first little emoji drop here. Some of this first-party abuse might be like, oh, that wasn't me. Like, I didn't do that. Especially alcohol, tobacco, and I didn't buy that. No, that I swear it wasn't. I must have been stolen. There's so much stuff going on. But then a lot of it is just kind of pure evil, right? Photography, for instance. Yeah, you bought that $7,000 camera, and now you're trying to get it for free. Weapons and accessories, the latest DJ equipment, etc. Some of this might be pure sticker shock. When we think about pet supplies, I don't know how many of you have pets. I've got 3 dogs here and a dozen chickens out on the ranch, and that feed ain't cheap, and that dog food ain't cheap, and maybe you're struggling to make ends meet. You're feeling the effects of inflation, and you're saying to yourself, oh man, what am I going to do about all that money that I just dropped on pet food or, vitamins for my kids? File a chargeback, And then finally you get into this like murky area where you've got a combination of embarrassment for those ugly shoes you just bought, or, they were really expensive, or you're just being evil. And then you could kind of compound all of these with all 3. So maybe my sociologist here might want to chime in as to why good buyers go bad. There's a myriad of reasons. None of them are particularly good. And I think every vertical can suffer from every, element of the human condition in terms of why I would pull up my bank app, hit that chargeback button, and go from there. Fighting these is fun when you have a dedicated team to do it. And here at Signified, we do. This is an example from friendly fraud recovery that just happened around a basketball goal or a basketball hoop. Here in the South, we say goal. But, on the left, you can see the delivery photo. On the right, you can see the compelling evidence that just really came off Google Maps Street View. Like, these people were advertising there. I love that growing up when you'd be riding your bike around, there was a hoop right in the middle of the street. Just kind of invites you for that like celebrity 3-point shot, you know? But using this kind of freely accessible data, you're able to say, okay, well, not only did they receive it, but they're flaunting it. Therefore, no free hoop for you, my friend. You know, but how many of us actually have that kind of team who can do this? How many of us actually have those hours in the day and those resources to spend on this? That's a question that I'd love to hear from you as well, in terms of what you're working with and what some of the headaches are there. I wanted to give you one more kind of take before we open this up to talk about all these different flavors of first party fraud and abuse. Promotional abuse. Okay, promo code stacking, exclusive promo code drops. And here's a little story for you coming out of EMEA. Okay, we've got a global retailer in EMEA who wanted to give exclusive promo codes to their most loyal shoppers. They had a list that their marketing team spent months to curate. These are our best buyers. We're going to give them this exclusive deal. Well, things kind of went south pretty quickly. It didn't stay so exclusive. We started seeing, and the merchants started seeing untargeted people out of Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia accessing these codes. And when they were accessing these codes, they started trying to offshore goods through the use of freight forwarders, sometimes through phishing campaigns, malware, etc. But clearly, this was being ramped up in a very bad way and used by the people that were not supposed to get their hands on these codes. And we found, end of day, that 70% of the orders that were placed using that code were fraudulent. And the breakdown kind of looked like this, where there would be sometimes a delivery address, let's say in France, but we saw a lot of packages, a lot of IP activity, and a lot of kind of fingerprinting coming out of Southeast Asia, coming out of China, where clearly the word got out about this code, the wrong people were using it, and all that marketing spend was for naught, kind of wound up in the wrong hands. So, a little trip down memory lane before we get into our conversation. Do you remember, I feel really old here. Do you remember the frozen yogurt trends of the like I remember these. What happened to them? I mean they're still out there, I think, but how many dates I went on back in the day where it's like, let's go get some frozen yogurt. You could pick from like 90 different flavors, and 88% of them aren't good. You know, you got every topping on earth that people were just kind of sneezing on already in that little salad bar that they would have. But I digress. These are all the kind of flavors, or at least maybe the most readily accessible flavors to first party abuse. We talked about first party chargebacks, promotional abuse. Refund abuse is a huge one for those of us who are at MRC. It sounded like every other word that came out of people's mouths was about refunds abuse, returns abuse, etc. Shelly, your subscription fraud, this is why I was thinking about you, right? We spent a whole episode or issue of this podcast around that. Reseller abuse, a lot of times where we're thinking about marketplaces being saturated, or kind of global markets being saturated by our products. Maybe we're trying to expand there, and all of a sudden someone's buying them and shipping them there. And how do we contain this? How do we stop this? It goes beyond chargebacks, right? And also loyalty abuse, people double dipping, people, spinning up new accounts or merging a bunch of accounts into one to really take advantage of a loyalty offering. So my question for you, and the conversation I want to have today, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm about to dive into the chat. I'm not savvy enough to have this screen open with the chat at the same time, but I want to hear about your first party abuse and nightmares. In addition to your dreams, we talk a lot about dreams here. We did a whole episode on Herzog for those of you who are concerned with dreams. That was last week. What are your nightmares and dreams around first party abuse? Everyone here is suffering from it, or maybe you're handling it really well. So I'd love to hear from you. Let's open up the chat, and I will shut my mouth for a few seconds.
All right, I'll go ahead and start since you called me out a couple of times, Vito. We get it from all areas. So for those of you who didn't see in the chat, I'm the manager of loss prevention and investigations at Peloton. And so I'm looking at things from a product not acceptable standpoint, but also people who are missing the 30-day trial period with our fitness units. You have 30 days to have it in your house. And at day 31, we stop accepting it back. And well, it's not my fault that you forgot and didn't use it. And your bike has now become a coat hanger. Super sorry. Now maybe try using it since you're going to pay for it. That's my thought, but I digress. My favorite, though, is when we can prove what's going on. Obviously, we take photos of delivery inside the house. So it's there. We take photos of activation, and then all of that is on our platform. So my favorite category that we win, I want to say 98% of, because there are some that fall through the cracks, is product unacceptable, whether it's coming through my fitness unit itself that was delivered or the subscription, because all I do is show how they signed up, have the opportunity to cancel if they want, and then I download their workout history and I send it to them. Like, so it was unacceptable, yet they worked out 7 days this week. Go them. They're paying for it. So we actually win a lot of those because people think that we're not paying attention. But turns out we are. We are having issues with, now we're doing better because we put some stopgaps in. We use Shopify as a platform for our apparel. And we were having issues with a group of, I want to call them friendly fraudsters. And no offense to any soccer moms on the call. They were a bunch of soccer moms who are Peloton addicts. And they figured out that if you placed an order on Shopify and called in and canceled it, there was a disconnect between our shipping and the canceled order, and it would still ship out. They all have civil demand letters right now. Some of them owe me $12,000 for a product that they received that they didn't pay for. And this is just straight apparel. So that's a fun one I'm having a lot of fun with right now.
Yeah, Shelly, you've really ruined the conversation around the old sliced oranges distribution center over there.
I did. Right now it's Peloton leggings that they're handing out to all the kids.
That's amazing that you're able to leverage your own data and kind of the product itself against the bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's taken some digging and some connections, and you always are best friends with your legal department because they support you if you're best friends with them. But yeah, it's been good.
Part of the fight there is going to be creating that compelling evidence to ship out. And Shelly's walked us through that on a previous episode. If you look on YouTube, we have all of our episodes there. So I highly recommend if you want a masterclass on how to craft a compelling evidence letter to fight that friendly fraud chargeback, go back and check that one out. We also had Augie on from our chargeback team to walk us through that. So definitely masterclass type stuff if you want to get into that. So thank you for that, Shelly. If I go into the chat here, we've got a lot of great stuff. I like to call out resident Dodger fan, Justin Hicken here, who says, we see customers not receiving their order as soon as they would like and not reaching out to support about it, then filing a chargeback and the order getting delivered a day or two later. What kind of efficacy have you had there, Justin, in fighting those or at least curtailing that kind of behavior?
Well, those are usually ones we win. Obviously, they're more of a pain, it's a waste of time. And probably like most people here, I mean, we have a system set up to where if you are putting in a correct email address, obviously we can't control what type of filters somebody has on their email and what goes to spam or whatnot, but we are emailing you a tracking number and we're sending out an email saying, thank you for placing your order. Once it's placed, we send something out once the order ships, and they should get a third and final email once it's been delivered. And many of the times where we're able to get a hold of these customers, it's the same story. It's, oh, I never got any emails. We say, well, is this the correct email address? Lots of times we find that either someone mistyped something or they, have some of these alias emails that they just use because they know eventually they're going to get a lot of marketing stuff and they don't want their inboxes flooded. And so they're just not checking And it's frustrating when we find out, well, gee, you know, if you were concerned about it, why didn't you reach out to us? And they don't really ever have a good answer for that. It's just easier for them to dispute the charge because they thought it wasn't going to come, and really it came the next day or 2 days later. Or I think Ben mentioned, you know, sometimes we have these people that'll order on a Friday afternoon. Well, our fulfillment center is not getting that thing out until Monday at the earliest, and it seems like it's been a long time for them, but really it hasn't even been a business day. And so it's just stuff like that that's just kind of a pain to deal with, you know.
And when we talk about pain, by just human hours, is that where the pain really is? I mean, is it just a
Yeah.
slog to?
Just a waste of time, you know. You don't want to call somebody dumb or stupid to their face, but you're just
You
like,
might want to, right? You might really
this
want.
really could have been solved. Like even if you have questions, reach out to us. Like we're easy to get a hold of. It's, you know, you know, don't not do anything, and then all of a sudden we see a chargeback, and then we're chasing you down to say, hey, we're showing this got delivered, but we think we know what happened because the chargeback was filed a couple days before it got delivered. And, you know, we just want to confirm that you got it. Yes, you got it. Okay, you know, if you could drop that on your end, but we're probably going to have to submit something anyways just to cover our butts.
For my armchair sociologist out there, Justin's kind of talking about this immediacy thing, and it seems like it's only getting worse, right? And it's not just from the young ones, not just from the kids. Like even the old heads are feeling like I need it now, I need it now, I need it now. And Ben, you made a little nod there toward Amazon's refund process. Refund before the product is returned to the merchant. Do you think that's driven kind of this culture of immediacy and kind of Justin's pain point a little bit there?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to compete against Amazon's customer service or their programs because like they've made things very easy nowadays. And so for any other business, you know, any practice that doesn't meet up to Amazon standards, like you're fighting to for that customer service. And so even chargebacks too. Chargebacks nowadays takes a few clicks on your phone and you can just do that compared to calling into customer service, which in our heads feels like it should be very easy. Just contact customer service. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of, we figure out where your package is at, and take care of anything that you have. But yeah, Amazon and a lot of the chargebacks, which is more customer based now in their favor, it just makes it harder on the merchant.
To that point, I want to call out my good friend, Brian Davis. Brian, you said you just record on this exact philosophy. Can you kind of double click on what Ben's talking about here and Amazon driving the market, Amazon driving people's noggins, their sensory overload, maybe? What are you feeling, seeing, thinking, and maybe what would you suggest out of that from our
So it's coming
psychological?
from a lot of different companies that are like customer centric. Like everyone wants to be customer centric, but that means a lot of different things when it comes down to processes and speed and conversion and lifetime value and churn, depending on your business model, if you have subscription based, it is kind of driving all of it. And now it's kind of like commented on VAMP, some of the visa regulations around chargebacks is kind of sparking this conversation again, because it's like, all right, how much delay can we put in? How much customer experience should we try to kind of build into our processes, and who are actually handling these touch points? So if the fraud team or wherever your fraud organization falls within, usually it's either customer ops side or end side. That'll kind of drive some of the metrics there. In the long of it, it is kind of around, we want to provide this awesome experience for our customers. They keep on coming back and back and back. The lifetime value and conversion, those are the driving metrics, which then puts these back end teams, maybe not the revenue generating focused teams, kind of your traditional cost centers, at this like, well, we see this problem, we see these losses, and the losses have to get big enough and bad enough until internal processes start to kind of move away from these growth by any means. So Amazon's a leader. Everyone wants to grow up to be Amazon. So they look at that as what are they doing to kind of keep the market share that they have? How are they able to fend off the Walmarts? How are they able to fend off the Targets, who have huge brands as well, but traditionally a lot of people go to Amazon. They have their subscription-based business. So these companies who might not be able to handle that at scale offer these types of policies that people start skirting in. Shelly, you kind of started to talk about like the policies that you're seeing and the types of returns or these little loopholes of, we have a 30-day return policy, refund policy. And then you see a lot of returns and refunds happening on day 29. So there's this idea of test it, try it out, don't love it. I know I can get my money back. And if they can't get my money back, I'm just going to go to my bank and say, I've never heard of this company. So the consumer habit of shifting the instant gratification is really, really hard for merchants. And it's a challenge that not necessarily everyone internally at companies understand how to lead that conflictive sometimes conversation to something that might go against the top two metrics, being lifetime value and customer conversion. And those policies, as intended, are supposed to support those, but are very easy to abuse.
Well, fantastic points there, Brian. And you kind of bring up something here where, yeah, there's the difficulty element, and how do we do this is a real banging our heads on the wall. So with that being said, what are the dreams or wishes for something like this? What would help me as someone sitting in this seat and having to figure out these problems? What would really help me in terms of informing my decisioning, maybe streamlining my process, maybe better anticipating the growing sort of instant gratification, concept or tendency for these buyers to have? What would really help me? Shelly, I saw you come off mute. There you go.
Oh, I don't know if this would help you, but the amount of times I'm told we factored in that for allowable fraud makes me smoke come out my ears. I'm like, so you're basically telling me my job is worthless. Cool, thanks. But it's one of those things where I'm like, here's what we're seeing. Help me mitigate this. Oh, that's part of our allowable fraud. No, that's not how allowable fraud works. You don't have this defined correctly. So yeah. And then when they quote industry standards at you and they have them wrong, that's my favorite, because then you can correct them.
Yeah. Anytime, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, anytime you hear about the cost of doing business, it makes you want to go drive a bus and not do this anymore, right?
Yeah. Oh no, it makes me actually fight harder for it, and makes me want to prove them wrong. That's my favorite part. So no, I don't know what the answer is for my dream world. My dream world is for them to actually understand that I need to be part of initial conversations when you start something, because as I tell everybody, and I may have said it on the call before, you need to invite me because I think like the shady person in the room. That's my job. And none of you were all thinking dollar signs, and I'm thinking, how could this walk out the door? How is somebody going to manipulate this system? How am I going to get something for free? That's literally my job. So to bring me to the calls so I can tell you, you've got a hole right there. Somebody's going to take advantage of it. And at least going into it, instead of me coming in 6 months into a project saying, who left the safe open and the door unlocked and the door open? No, everybody just there you go.
Let's pile on that. How do we get the fraud octopus to get its tentacles into these conversations? Kind of a gross analogy, but how do we do that? I mean, some of you, I can imagine, have had really good success in getting yourself into those conversations and being heard a little bit more effectively. Love to hear from you on that.
I got something. It's always worked. I use Visa's evolving like programs and restrictions and conditions. I use that as an excuse all the time because, and it's not even, I mean, it's a valid excuse. There's thresholds as an e-commerce business that we have to meet. or not exceed, right? So I'm always using that as some sort of leverage there, where we want to continue to process credit card transactions, and we kind of have these rules that we have to follow and these thresholds we have to stay under, and that usually gets a little bit more. That gets me a little bit more ahead of the game. Like I have a similar problem as Shelly, where I might be brought into a project after it's 2 weeks from launching, and I'm kind of raising a flag there. But using the credit card standards is something that's kind of worked for us.
So being the person who actually does the heavy reading that nobody else wants to do is like a nice little, it's like the person brings donuts to the party.
Yeah.
You brought the receipts a little bit. That's helped.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of fine print to go through and stuff. And the the communication that we get from like those partnerships are not great. I can't tell you I've seen a single email from Visa about Vamp, but I have seen all kinds of other notifications and alerts and webinars and information about Vamp from all other sources that I follow or pay attention to. So, the communication on their end about like what's coming down to you as a merchant, or even from your acquirer saying, hey, this is going to start affecting us, and this is how it might change, perspective, or any type of settings, or contract, or rates, or anything to a merchant. Like we get nothing. It's been absolute crickets. So I'm kind of the one that's having to comb through that and figure out how it could impact us.
I think you've just summoned the elephant in the room too, which is that V word that everyone's kind of a little spooked about. And I've learned a lot about the V word, not just from people here at Signified. Shavi just did a great chat about it, but from some people who are on this call right here, Ryan, Brian, etc. So in terms of what Jamie's talking about, in terms of best understanding the bank's policies, the card issuers policies, and all that kind of stuff, and using that as leverage into these higher level conversations that Shelly's alluding to, any kind of best practices or tips there that you'd like to share with the community? Some things you might want to look out for, or be ready to answer on at whim to make yourself be the SME in the room. Anything there that you could kind of help people out with, that would be much appreciated.
I can start to help. So Vamp is confusing, and Visa's huge. So they're very careful about communication, and they're private calls that happen with a handful of their partners. And then the communication kind of gets passed along via partners. So we're entering an advisory period now where they're kind of seeing how are the new ratios going to kind of play out for merchants and acquirers. They have a grace period at the end of this for merchants, and then they'll look to see how the ratios are performing to determine if they need to tighten it or change the ratios. On the acquirers, there's a very strict ratio for their new Vamp ratio. A big change for it is if people are using the programs through Verify, a Visa product like a RDR or CDRN, there's been a little bit of push and pull. It has been excluded from the ratio. It is now included in the ratio. It might be excluded from the ratio. So because of all of this, there's not a lot of public announcements of what the ratio will be. I lead with all that to say it's confusing, and it's hard for people who are very close and have been in the space for much longer than me, because it is confusing, and you have to kind of be within these private channels directly connected to Visa to really hear it from them and not hearsay. There's a little bit of a nuance of if the acquirers are enforced on the stricter thresholds, that they might do some of the policing instead of Visa with the more lenient threshold that acquirers may or may not manage their own portfolios, their merchants, the people that are on their network, to keep them even below the thresholds. And what would that look like? So there's a lot of TBD, which as a merchant makes it extremely hard and confusing of, well, do I wait? Do I change my strategies? Are my strategies working? And that's right now where like all my conversations are. So the way I think about it today is there's two main ratio. You have your VAMP ratio. Mainly everyone's here is the merchant wise. You don't really necessarily need to be concerned about the acquirer because you're not an acquirer. So there's the VAMP ratio. If you are using RDR alerts or CDRN alerts or MasterCard product, Ethica, then again, understand your entire ratio with those included or with those excluded. That will give you a starting point of where you stand in both stances, depending on where Visa does or doesn't enforce their threshold. There's the enumeration ratio, which is a new one, which is supposed to be targeting card testing against merchants. Higher profile, there's fees that are tied to it. So it's about kind of monitoring those scales. There's a ratio that is tied to that as well. So that can be a harder metric for people to kind of find today. So my first bit of starting everyone off with this, we are in the grace period today. We're in their advisory period today. The advisory period is until September 30th. And then hopefully by then they've come out with a handful more announcements. But from there, first step is get those ratios in line. Understand your VAMP ratio and ask around to whether you guys have the data, your data team, your acquirers, whoever you can ask, pull the data and get your enumeration ratios. That's a hard one. You said Brian and Ryan was hard. I think enumeration ratios is actually harder for me. But get those numbers so you have a baseline and don't wait until September 30th to say, what is Visa actually going to do? Because if they don't change anything, enforcement can begin at that point. So get a level set of that. I am happy to share some of the documentation that I've collected from different resources. So I can share that with Vito. If you all are Signified, I'm not a part of Signify, but I'm happy to kind of support the Signify team to kind of pass that information along, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share some of the documents I've collected from some of my personal board of advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. Give Brian a follow on LinkedIn. I mean, the stuff he posts is fantastic. It's like, there's a lot to learn here. And this is a nebulous and evolving issue. And kind of being on the bleeding edge of it is going to give you that leg up in those boardrooms and those meetings that you want to get into. So absolutely go there. Fantastic stuff, Brian. Well done. While we have the last 5 minutes here, I think we got a nice thread going on. And this is going to bring us back to our armchair sociological conversation. At the risk of being provocative, Peter writes, my suspicion is that outside of these evil people that just see this as a profit center, most people feel justified in their abuse. Why? Customer sat rates are going up, but people feel abused. If we kind of zoom out of e-commerce a little bit and put our, citizens of the world hats on for a second, why do you think this is? I mean, what is it that drives good buyers to kind of feel all right with doing these things? Or maybe why are they feeling abused if they're not getting, like Justin says and Ben was talking about, that kind of immediate kind of shipping? What is it in our society? I'm shaking my stick at the sky here. What is it in our society now that's driving that? I'd love to just hear your thoughts, human to human here.
Vito, I think it's a couple things. I think one, just lack of awareness and education. Like, most people don't understand how things work, let alone when they file the insurance fraud claim, get the check and have their cousin fix the bumper. They really don't understand the downstream implications of what that fraud is doing to them and to other people. So I really think there's a consumer education piece. But then importantly, I think we're just wired to have a failure here because we're opportunists at our core. And we constantly look to live in the gray because the gray is the unknown. The gray has no good or bad rules. And that's where we're looking to exploit areas that we can win, or a glitch in the system, or a workaround in the system, as you'll hear about it. So I feel like those two things are definitely leading drivers for why people feel justified to do this.
Fantastic. And I think if you have a group of people who live in the gray, they're all here, right? We live in that kind of gray, and not in a bad way, and I'm trying to fight it way. And maybe the desire to go to our little coffee clutch, our soccer meetings, and say, "Oh, guess what I got away with." You know, this is gonna give me kind of social capital. I found a new little wrinkle in the matrix that's gonna make people think that I'm so cool. Fantastic stuff there, Ryan. I think, but again, though, how do we fight that, right? That's just human nature? Is that just a job creator for us? Like, is that just where we live nowadays? Or do you see that consumer education piece coming in the pipeline? I know there's a lot of great work about maybe the pig butchering and the things that actually, you know, directly hurt people and lead to like nightmarish situations for people. But is that something that's as easily portrayed in the media? Shelly, I see you off mute. Ryan, I see you off mute. Go at it, y'all.
I know. I was just thinking, like, you made some great points, Ryan. I love the gray reference because I would always tell people that's why I read the union contracts, because then I understood the black and white, so I could live in the gray. And then, hey, did you read the union contract that covers you? Oh no, you didn't. Cool. But other than that, I think there's that separation that from people where I can't tangibly see the things that I'm hurting, so it doesn't matter. I would deal with that when I dealt with internal theft from my previous company. I worked for Walt Disney World and dealt with massive amounts of internal theft. And one of the things be like, well, I mean, they make billions and billions of dollars. Does it really matter? Yeah, it matters because you stole something. They're not connecting that piece. They're looking at how the end user doesn't get hurt when you take advantage of a coupon code. Oh, it's fine. It's just 20%. Well, now you've told your friends. We used to make the reference when I worked in food and beverage. If every single person ate one French fry a day, we would have no French fries. So, and it's just that domino effect of once you tell everybody you can have one French fry a day, now, you know, Walt Disney World employs 77,000 employees. All 77,000 employees ate a French fry today. Perfect. We have zero French fries left. So and then the lack of ownership to it. Well, if the system allows it, then it's okay. There's always going to be gaps.
Absolutely. And we started this with one experiment. Your homework is to look up the Milgram experiment. I think a lot of you know about the Milgram experiment. That's when people were shocking people they couldn't see, and it just went higher and higher because they couldn't see it. So there's that invisible element. All of you, this was phenomenal. Bottom of my heart, taking my Signify hat off, taking my professional hat off. I love just meeting with you and hearing very smart people talk about their problems and solutions. So thank you for coming out on a Wednesday. Thank you for doing this every week. For everyone who just joined for the first time, I love seeing you. For all of our friends who came back, bottom of my heart, thank you. Hope you have a beautiful week. Please connect with the people that spoke today. There's a lot to learn there. And I just wish you the best of luck with everything that we're doing here. We're going to meet again next week. If you think of anything in the interim that you want to cover on next week's episode, I am your soldier, Tony, as they say in The Sopranos. You know, I'm your soldier. Send it to me and we'll get it going. Until then, my friends, have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much. And you're the best.
Thanks, Vito.
See y'all.